Shall we, shall we get the show on the road? Everyone excited? I'm so excited. Uncharacteristically, we're starting right. So, good afternoon and welcome to Ambassador's Dialogue, U.S. Korea Relations Indo-Pacific Era. My name, you know, is Youngju Ryu, and I direct the NAM Center for Korean Studies within the International Institute right here at the University of Michigan. I would like to thank our honored guests. I'm not going to be able to name all of them, and of course, I'm really grateful to all my students with me. But let me just mention a few. The director of the International Institute, Professor Johannes von Moltke, Consul General Kim Jong-han, who made the trek from Chicago, everyone from Korea Economic Institute of America, Washington, D.C., who made a longer trek, and Honorary Consul David Roden in Detroit. And of course, the four ambassadors, former and present, who are here with us. Today's dialogue is happening at a truly critical juncture in both the United States and the Republic of Korea. What with the U.S. presidential election happening just 2 months out, and the Yoon administration in South Korea enmeshed in a number of domestic controversies that seem to be rapidly spiraling to something like this, even as we speak. So we are all the more grateful for this rare opportunity to hear from our ambassadors who spend their days and nights, I would imagine, in the proverbial belly of the beast. This event is being brought to you by the NAM Center for Korean Studies, which became the first named Korean Studies Center about 14 years ago, and we're very, very proud about that. And the NAM Center at the University of Michigan is the heart of Korea-related research, education, and public outreach. A big shout out to Eva Paul, who organized this event from the NAM Center, and our co-sponsoring partners, Korea Economic Institute of America, and the Weiser Diplomacy Center at the Ford School of Diplomacy at the University of Michigan, and representatives, the leaders from both organizations will come and open remarks shortly. So let me first invite the director of the Weiser Diplomacy Center, Ambassador Susan Page, to give welcoming remarks. A professor of practice in international diplomacy at the Ford School and a professor from practice at the law school here at the University of Michigan, Ambassador Page is a former diplomat whose remarkable career spanned the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the United Nations, and non-governmental organizations in senior roles for decades across East, Central, and Southern Africa, and in Haiti and Nepal. Ambassador Page was the first U.S. ambassador to the Republic of South Sudan and served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, covering Central and Southern Africa and Sudan, legal advisor to the IGAD-led peace process that resulted in the comprehensive peace agreement for Sudan. Ambassador Page also served as Special Representative of the Secretary General for Haiti and head of the United Nations Mission for Justice Support. So, Ambassador Page, would you please?
Thank you very much, Youngju. I'm going to try this, so be patient with me. 환영합니다. Thank you very much, and welcome to our distinguished guests, everyone. Now, I'm glad you didn't hear that last part. It's a real honor to be partnering with the NAM Institute and also with the Korean Economic Institute to bring this Ambassadors Forum to Ann Arbor. We're so pleased that you are all here with us and to have this real pleasure of having two distinguished ambassadors one of whom I worked with at the State Department, and it's great to see him again and catch up. And Ambassador Cho, it's really wonderful to see you here as well. Welcome to Ann Arbor. This is where I went undergrad, so it's I've been back now for 4 years teaching at the law school and the Ford School. And I'll just say a very brief word about the Weiser Diplomacy Center, which is emerging as a key hub in the Midwest for policy engagement and practical training in diplomacy and foreign affairs. The center opened in 2019 with a gift from Ron Weiser, who has been a regent at the university, is a proud alumnus of U of M, and a very prominent donor across many spheres of the university. Since the center's opening, we have hired 3 full-time professors of practice, which I am one, with skills in international diplomacy and statecraft, political, economic, and military mediation and negotiations, and national intelligence and security policy. We have hosted high-profile events with speakers, such as this one, even though we're only co-hosting. But we have had Secretary of State Blinken, former Secretaries Clinton and Rice. We have also hosted former Undersecretary of Treasury for International Affairs, Brent McIntosh, and former UN Undersecretary General and Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, Dr. Vera Songwe. In addition, the Weiser Diplomacy Center routinely houses practitioners as visiting instructors for half-term seminars or for shorter engagements from a few days to a few weeks. And we are thrilled that former Ambassador Daniel Shields has returned this semester to teach his half-semester class on U.S. diplomacy on the Indo-Pacific. So again, with that, welcome, and we're again really pleased to have you both here and with Korea Economic Institute and in support with the NAM Center. Thank you.
Ambassador Page, and it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce the President and Chief Executive Officer at the Korea Economic Institute of America, Mr. Scott Snyder. Previously, Mr. Snyder was a Senior Fellow for Korea Studies and Director of the Program on U.S. Korea Policy of the Council of Foreign Relations from 2011 to March 2024. And Mr. Snyder is the author of United States South Korea Alliance, Why It May Fail and Why It Must Not, and South Korea at the Crossroads, Autonomy and Alliance in an Era of Rival Powers. Mr. Snyder received a BA from Rice University and an MA from the Regional Studies East Asia program at Harvard University, and he'll give opening remarks.
Thank you, Director Yu. Pleasure to be with you, Ambassador Page, Ambassador Shields. We're really grateful for the partnership with the NAM Center and also the Weiser Diplomacy Center here at University of Michigan. The Korea Economic Institute is an organization that is really focused on trying to bridge the gap between the U.S. and South Korea. One of our really significant programs is this type of program where we're actually going on a tour with ambassadors from the United States to South Korea and the ambassador from South Korea to the United States in a joint tour of various important cities across the country, really in order to show the vibrancy and strength of the bilateral relationship. I think it's just about the only program that exists where 2 ambassadors from partner countries are actually traveling together with each other. And so that's important, and it's really symbolic. Ambassador Goldberg earlier today, he was telling me he thought that the relationship is really strong right now, and I would agree. And I think that the strength of that relationship is in part due to the contributions of the 2 ambassadors that we're going to hear from today. Just a little bit more about what my organization is doing and what it really hopes to do. Generally speaking, I think that it's the case that Koreans know a lot about the United States, and they absorb a lot just in their societies about the United States. But we're at a moment right now in the United States where Korea is also touching the lives of Americans in new ways and different ways. And one of the things that we want to do at KEI is to explain how that matters and why it matters. And that's the reason why we partner with universities and world affairs councils and do programs in our own headquarters in Washington, D.C. To try to shed light on key issues in the relationship, talk about the problems in the relationship, and hopefully to provide encouragement and illumination for a way forward. This is a relationship that has lasted now for over 70 years in the form of a security alliance with each other. And historically, I grew up hearing the phrase forged in blood to describe the relationship because of the origins of the relationship around the Korean War. But I'd like to add to that in this environment, because increasingly, as a result of the flows of Korean investment into the United States and the strengthening of the economic dimension of the relationship, I like to say that the relationship is being powered by chips, batteries, and clean technology. And this is important because the relationship, in my view, is more mutually beneficial, less one-sided, and arguably more important than ever before. And so for that reason, we're really grateful for the opportunity to come to the University of Michigan, to partner with you all, and in particular, to present these two excellent practitioners of diplomacy from two countries that are currently experiencing a very vibrant relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. And now on to the dialogue that everybody's been waiting for. Let me introduce, and we're really fortunate to have Ambassador Dan Shields as our moderator this time today. Ambassador Shields served as U.S. Ambassador to Brunei from 2011 to 2014, handling sensitive South China Sea related issues in connection with Brunei's hosting in 2013 of the various summits involving the Association of South Asian Nations, or the ASEAN. Ambassador Shields led two other U.S. diplomatic missions in Southeast Asia. In 2017, at the U.S. mission to ASEAN in Jakarta, and in 2009, when he led Embassy Singapore in supporting then President Obama's participation in the APEC, or Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. But Ambassador Shields' early to mid-career assignments were in East Asia, mainly in Japan and China, including as political minister counselor at Embassy Beijing from 2004 to 2007. And he speaks Chinese and Japanese, and we have to work on that for you. And his very first tour in the Foreign Service was as a vice consul at Embassy Manila from 1985 to 87, where he witnessed firsthand and reported on the people power demonstrations and the fall of the Marcos regime. After retirement, Ambassador Shields has been consulting, teaching courses, and conducting simulations relating to diplomacy and U.S.-Asia relations. And so you can see that our ship today will be steered with an expert hand at the helm. Ambassador Shields, would you do us the honor of beginning the dialogue and by introducing the two?
Thank you for this review. For me, working around the Indo-Pacific, especially the time at Embassy Beijing, I really developed this enduring fascination with the Korean Peninsula. And so I feel fortunate, and I think all of us in this room are fortunate to have our lead speakers with us here today, the U.S. Ambassador to Seoul and the South Korean Ambassador to Washington. Ambassador Hyundong Cho is the 28th Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to the United States of America. He served right before that as the first Vice Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Seoul. Going back to earlier in his career, he entered the Foreign Service in 1985 and held various positions in places like Geneva and Mongolia. But in the quarantine, Ambassador Cho's career was returning to the United States to advance this vital partnership between our two countries. He served as first secretary in Washington, director of the North American Division 3 in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and deputy chief of mission in Washington. In addition to his roles in the United States, Ambassador Cho has held various positions within the Korean Foreign Service. He was Chief Human Resource Officer at the General Affairs Division in MOFAC, Senior Administrator in the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security. He was Director of MOFAC's North Korea Nuclear Diplomacy Planning Division, Assistant Secretary and Director General in the Office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Public Diplomacy and Management. Ambassador Cho's expertise extends beyond diplomacy. He served as the head of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization Investment and Technology Promotion Office. Ambassador Cho earned a BA in Spanish from Hankook University of Foreign Studies. Let me now introduce Ambassador Goldberg. Ambassador Goldberg is the U.S. Ambassador to the RK and was confirmed by the Senate in 2022. He previously served as U.S. Ambassador to Colombia. He was the Charge d'Affaires of the U.S. Embassy in Havana, followed by a year as diplomat in residence at Georgetown University. From 2013 to 16, Ambassador Goldberg was U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines. Before that, he was the Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of Intelligence and Research at the State Department. He was U.S. Ambassador to Bolivia, Chief of Mission in Pristina, Kosovo, Charge d'Affaires and Deputy Chief of Mission in Santiago de Chile. He was the coordinator for the implementation of UN sanctions on North Korea. That was the capacity on which I first met him at the U.S. Embassy in Singapore. He's had other overseas tours in Bogota, Victoria, and he was a member of the State Department transition team from the Clinton to the Bush administrations. He was Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs, Executive Assistant to the Deputy Secretary of State. He was the Bosnia Desk Officer and Special Assistant to Ambassador Richard Goldberg, the member of the American negotiating team in the lead up to the Dayton Peace Conference to help bring peace to Bosnia. He holds the personal rank of Career Ambassador, which is the highest rank in the U.S. Foreign Service. He's received numerous awards, including Presidential Distinguished and Meritorious Service Awards. He's a native of Boston and a graduate of Boston University. So if you could join me in giving a round of applause. Now the ambassadors will share their perspectives on the significance of the U.S.-Korea Security Alliance, not only for bilateral relations, but also for the broader region and world. And also talk about the economic partnership between the two countries, including ties between Korea and Michigan. I would now like to invite the panelists to give their opening remarks. Ambassador Cho.
Thank you very much for kind introduction. Well, I'm so lucky to be here for the first time in my life. Well, I'm happy to be here in one of the best universities in the United States. I also want to recognize the value of contribution by family for the school in which established Center for Korean Studies, which is, I think, the model case of contribution. So let me first of all share a brief overview of Korean relations in the States. Last year, we commemorated 70th anniversary of the Korea-U.S. Alliance, a partnership forged in blood during the Korean War that has led to tremendous success for those countries. But behind this achievement are the immeasurable sacrifice of the American service members who came to Korea to defend our country. And in particular, over 220,000 young men from the state of Michigan who fought for freedom in this movement. We owe these true heroes our deepest respect. 7 decades later, the Korea-U.S. Alliance has evolved in a dynamic partnership spanning security, economy, science, and technology. Our two nations have never been closer. President Yoon has made 5 separate visits to the United States over the past year, highlighting the ongoing strengths of partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Our strong collaboration is rooted in security, but in response to a growing threat, particularly from North Korea, this July our alliance was upgraded to a nuclear-based alliance, we call it, as outlined in the joint statement, declaring the guidelines for nuclear deterrence and nuclear operation. The last year's Camp David Summit also opened a new chapter in trilateral cooperation between Korea, U.S. and Japan, marking a new milestone in our collective security effort. While security may seem distant in our daily lives in Ann Arbor, but the impact of our economic partnership is much more tangible. The Korea-U.S. economic relationship has never been stronger. The U.S. is Korea's second largest trading partner, with bilateral trade doubling over the past decade to reach $200 billion annually. Korean investment in the U.S. has also surged, exceeding $100 billion in just the past three and a half years. According to the Shoring Initiative in Nigeria, in 2023 alone, the Korean investment created 20,000 jobs across the Americas. It's number one. The role of Michigan in particular is crucial, as Korea has become the third largest import resource source and eighth largest export destination for the state of Michigan. Electric vehicles and semiconductors are key areas for cooperation, and Michigan excels in both. One-third of U.S. battery production happens here, and Michigan was recently ranked as top state for automotive and EV investment. So South Korean companies like LG Energy Solution, SK Siltron, Samsung SDI, and Hyundai Mobis are working closely with American partners in strengthening supply chains and creating jobs in Michigan. At the heart of our partnership are the shared values of rule of law and democracy, which also drive our cultural exchanges. I'm proud to see Korean culture, whether it's the film, music, food, anything else, being embraced in Michigan throughout the United States as never. Looking ahead, I'm confident that cultural and economic exchange between Korea and Michigan will continue to flourish. The Nam Center for Korean Studies here in Michigan will play a vital role in fostering this bond, acting as a hub that connects our two countries. Let us continue to build upon these shared values, strengthening partnership that will enrich the lives of people, generations to come. So now I look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas. We're happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Cho. Now I'd like to invite Ambassador Goldberg to speak, and after that, we'll go to questions and answers.
Thank you very much. And I too am just thrilled to be in Ann Arbor for the first time, I'm embarrassed to say. But it's also good to be here with two former colleagues, Ambassadors Page and Shields. Nice to see you again, showing me that there is life after the foreign service. And to Director Yu from the NAM Center. Thank you very much for hosting us, and my good friend, Ambassador Cho. The last year, a couple of years really, in the U.S.-Korean relationship has been extraordinary. As Ambassador Cho said, last year there were two events that really were hallmarks and foundation stones for the current relationship. The first was President Yoon's state visit to Washington in April of 2023. During that visit, the two presidents, Presidents Biden and Yoon, signed the Washington Declaration, which set out the new era in our security relationship, bringing, unfortunately, this relationship into the nuclear age because of the advances, the threats, and provocations from North Korea. It also established a nuclear consultative group, which now has guidelines and is moving forward in terms of our consultations together on a way forward for planning and discussion of how our extended deterrence will work in the Korean Peninsula. A hugely important event. The other part of that visit really is what expanded this relationship beyond security on the Korean Peninsula into whole new areas of cooperation in science and technology. A lot of it driven in academia. We went just before coming here to the Naval Architecture Department, how they're working with Seoul National University, how there are all kinds of cooperative ventures here at the University of Michigan, but throughout the academic world in the United States and in South Korea. So there is this relationship is more than just defending the people and country of South Korea jointly together in against the threats and provocations from North Korea. And then the other important event, of course, was the Camp David trilateral, which changed also the structure of Asian security architecture in the region. It enables us to work together as three advanced democratic countries that have science and technology to share, that also share values, democratic values, and beliefs in rule of law, and in the Indo-Pacific, more generally believe in issues that you've probably been watching, like freedom of navigation in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, the peaceful resolution of disputes. But when we work together, we can do so much more, both politically and in security, but also in science and technology. We came also today from a visit to SK Siltron, one of the companies working here in Michigan. It's remarkable. They're working on silicon carbide chips for the automotive industry, but also for batteries more generally, that allow batteries to work more efficiently, helping the environment, but also helping advance the industry for electric vehicles, because it allows electric vehicles to go further before charging. Those are the kinds of areas in the private sector that are also advancing our bilateral relationship. The $120 billion of Korean investments in the United States just since the beginning of the Biden administration. These are hugely important in terms of employment, good jobs here in Michigan. There are about 8,000 jobs currently that are the result of those investments, but also in states like Georgia and Texas and elsewhere where the chips industry and the electric vehicle industries are operating. Before we get to some of the questions that you might have, the other really interesting part of being in Korea at the moment is how it projects in the world. This is something that's pretty new, the last 20 years, possibly 30 years. The whole concept of Hallyu, the Korean wave, how Korean movies and TV dramas, many of which I'm sure you're watching, music, of course, K-pop especially, K-food, which has become so popular here in the US, all the Ks, are very, very emblematic of a new kind of Korea, a cool Korea, if you will. Seoul is a dynamic city. I don't know that 30, 40 years ago you would have said that. And it is dynamic, and it is a huge tribute to the hard work and innovation of the Korean people. But it's also a tribute to the security relationship that we've had. Because in addition to all of the sacrifice 71 years ago when the war ended and the 30,000 something US casualties, there are 28,500 troops remaining in Korea today, helping secure the Korean people with our allies, the Korean military. So it is a dynamic relationship. It's one that has brought us to the point, as Scott Snyder mentioned, is probably the best relationship we've had. And I want to give a special credit to the leadership, President Yoon in Korea. The reason being that that whole trilateral process really began because of his courageous political decision to improve relations with Japan, seeing it in the Korean interest, and then our interest in promoting the trilateral relationship. But if that original step had not been taken, and it was courageous politically, as many of you know, because of the decision to address some of the historical issues, which are an obstacle because of the tragic history of Japan in Korea. So this is a process that is still working. Some of the questions now about whether or not how durable it is, we are doing our best to put this in concrete. All of these steps we put in to the trilateral. The trilateral also is similar to what I mentioned in the bilateral relationship. We're working together on science and technology. The Seoul National University is working with the University of Chicago and Tokyo University on quantum physics. We're working on artificial intelligence. We're working on cybersecurity. All of these new 21st century issues. And also the Korean companies that are investing here are investing in areas that will help us produce a green economy. And there, I want to tout what we've done in the U.S., which is to help facilitate many of those investments through the Inflation Reduction Act in the area of batteries and EVs, and the CHIPS Act in semiconductors, which has helped hugely in bringing some of that investment to the United States.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Goldberg. Okay, so I appreciate the opening remarks from our distinguished panelists. So at this point, we'll transition into the panel discussion. I will break the ice by asking a couple questions, exercising my prerogative as moderator, and then after that, I will open the floor to questions from the audience. If you have a question, please state your name and your affiliation, and let me know if you're directly to a particular event. So my first question as a moderator, which I would like to direct to both panelists, if they may, is regarding Russia DPRK relations. President Putin made his visit to North Korea in June, signed a treaty of comprehensive strategic partnership, which includes a mutual defense provision. And I'd like to ask what the implications are for the ROK and the United States. Perhaps, I guess, you could answer.
Well, it's a tough question to answer within a meeting, but saying is, first of all, that was the visit by Russian president for the first time in 24 years. That shows the international situation right now, what's happening in Europe, both in Europe and Asia. You mentioned the security agreement signed by the two President Putin and Kim Jong. Is probably a revival of the old Soviet Union security agreement with the PRK in 1960s. But actually the growing military cooperation between the two is clear violation of the U.S. Security Council resolution. Under the sanction imposed by the United Nations Security Council, no country is allowed to have military cooperation with the PRK. That is very unfortunate. And an implication, well, maybe there's no immediate implication by that security agreement, but it has political implications, which I think has emboldened North Korea's position in dealing with outside countries. And they have, as already reported by the press, they have sent, I think, more than 10,000 containers, probably full of weapons to Ukraine. And Ukraine army confirmed that many of those short-range rockets made by Moscow were used in battlefield. There is clear violation in such a case. And North Korea has been, I mean, when I say North Korea has been important, means they have shut down any opportunity of engagement with the international community, except countries like Russia. And the current relation with Beijing looks even some kind of uneasy situation. Probably Beijing is not happy with what's going on in Beijing in terms of some strategic leverage they used to have. So we are now working very closely with the United States, countries. One of the cases we used to have the sanction committee established by the U.S. Security Council resolution, which has been a monitoring mechanism of the sanctions that was suspended by the Russian veto several months ago. So now we don't have such monitoring mechanism in the United Nations. So we are seeking some kind of alternative mechanism to continue the monitoring system on North Korea's violation of the U.S. Security Council. So I hope we will soon make some progress from the consultation among the like-minded countries.
I think one of the most concerning aspects of this agreement and the relationship that has arisen between Moscow and Pyongyang is Moscow's recognition, tacitly anyway, of the North Korean nuclear program. They've done so through the veto of that UN body. They no longer seem interested in sanctions or enforcing them. And also by protecting North Korea at the Security Council. China has done so to some degree, but now Russia seems full bore intent to veto any resolution if it were to come up for further provocations and activities that North Korea undertakes in violation of the very Security Council resolutions that Russia voted for. So it really is hugely hypocritical in the sense that when they signed this agreement, they talked about it being a barrier to future aggression against those two countries. And if you think about it, they're two of the biggest aggressors in the world. Russia and their aggression against, brutal aggression against Ukraine, where they're now using missiles and ammunition provided by North Korea, and North Korea's original aggression against the South in 1950, but still their threats and provocations to this day. So it's really quite an unholy alliance between these two, and one that is still on the watch to see if exactly not only what we know is showing up on the battlefield in Ukraine, but what might be coming back in the other direction towards North Korea.
Thank you, investors. My next question is for Investor Goldberg. Analysts have speculated that as the United States approaches elections, there's an increased risk of provocation from North Korea. There was a report from CSIS that suggested that chances of provocations are 4 times as high in an election year as in an ordinary year. So I'd like to know whether this possibility of a VPRK provocation around the elections is a concern for the United States.
Well, having had Korean balloons land on the residents' property and just outside them, I'm always ready for Korean provocations, and so are our armed forces, both countries. So it's hard to say, Dan, exactly what goes through in the, if you can call it a policy-making process that goes on, which is, of course, in one person's mind in North Korea, Kim Jong-un's. So all I can say is that we're ready should any eventuality occur, and I would hope, but to never say for certain, that it wouldn't be done with an eye towards our election.
Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. I'll ask one more question for Ambassador Cho, and after that, I'll open the floor for your questions. In January, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un declared South Korea to be an enemy state and ending discussions of peaceful reunification. What is the advocating of this?
Well, when you look back to decades of relations between South and East Korea, there have been ups and downs. Sometimes we had communications and connection between the two, and many times an absence. So maybe we're in that cycle. But I think that kind of statement by Kim Jong-un was that is also kind of example the North Korea's positions involved by their own operation with Russia. They believe Russia is nuclear power. They're new, well, it's not new, but stronger ally that North Korea vicious and also versus in dealing with their own people. So, but on the other hand, recently the President Yoon announced his own doctrine of unification based on freedom and democracy. We will not focus on some staged approach toward the ultimate unification of the Korean Peninsula, but we focus on also the human rights people, who 25 million people living under such harsh conditions, such oppression by the North Korean regime. And we'll focus on the human rights situation there. And also we will focus on some state approach to it. But the thing is, how to change the strategy calculation by Kim Jong-un and his regime is truly a tough question for us. Of course, it's been a long-standing goal for us to convince Moscow to change their strategy calculation by abandoning nuclear and allowing some engagement with outside the world, receiving assistance from outside the world, and opening society. But it's not in the case so far. So, where many people are very much pessimistic, skeptical about the future of unification and denuclearization of this, but we will not lose continue to give efforts toward North Korea together with the state.
Thank you, Ambassador Cho. Now I'd like to open the floor for any questions.
Hi, it's very nice to meet you, and thank you both for coming to Ann Arbor. My question is, President Yoon's approval rating on the Morning Consult Global Leader Approval Tracker just hit 17%, the lowest among the world leaders represented in the poll. A big contributing factor to this low rating has been President Yoon's stance on Japan, specifically his willingness to sweep the history of Japan's colonial violence under the rug on such issues such as comfort women and forced conscriptions of Koreans and Japanese mines in World War II factories. There's talk now in Korea that the Yoon administration is so pro-Japanese that it may even be preparing to cede Dokdo to Japan. Since President Obama pressed President Park Geun-hye and President Prime Minister Abe to come to a settlement over the comfort women issue in 2016, the United States seems to have been a strong proponent of strengthening Japan-Korea ties, even if it means looking the other way from individuals' claims over humanitarian issues raised by the two countries' colonial history. I would like to ask ambassadors, who are the winners and losers in South Korea of the deal to create a trilateral military alliance among U.S., Japan, and ROK at a time when the conservative Japanese government is increasingly turning revisionist about its history of colonial violence? Thank you.
I wasn't aware of, what poll did you cite?
So the Morning Consult Global Leader Factor Poll.
You mentioned 17%.
17.
The recent polls in Korea, the Real Meter and Gallup, which do them almost weekly, are around 30%. That's what I asked. Not that.
Yellow was 23.
They go up and down. But I'm not. They're both fairly low. But no, I go back to when I was ambassador in Colombia, and the president of I told the president of Colombia that President Biden's approval rating had gone down to 38%. He looked at it and said, "What's his secret?" His was like at 20%.
Yeah, maybe
You want to say something?
yeah, I mean that approval rate probably better than my previous views. Overall, I think many leaders around the world enjoys very low level of approval rate these days. But in reply to your question about Korea-Japan relations, it's true. We still have tough issues and questions of this from history of Japanese occupation. And maybe it will be difficult to ultimately resolve all these issues. The thing is, I think that President Yoon's initiative was based on his conviction that we will not forget what happened, but we will probably forgive some of them to overcome the past and move forward together with Japan's partner. Because we both are faced with some common challenges arising from the current international situation. Challenges arising from some growing threat competition with China, and also a threat from North Korea, and also a threat arising from the growing cooperation with Russia in terms of their military. So, and also we are faced with some also challenges that our business community, industrial community, have to work together to overcome their challenges. So he believes that we need to lower the barrier between Seoul and Tokyo, and that was his initiative. And it was, I think, well, to my view, is well received by his counterpart in Tokyo. And you have probably seen the latest meeting, outgoing Prime Minister Kishida. Probably it will be his the last foreign trip. Maybe one more. Probably one bilateral trip. Last one was farewell trip to Korea. That was his political gesture as a leader of LDP. That the legacy of bilateral relations, the improvement of bilateral relations between Korea and Japan, will be a legacy to be continued by his success. So that is the message. Prime Minister so we will be working together. Also to unite with the United States. So as a partner, strong and important partner to try and
I'd like to add to that. I wouldn't confuse the popularity or the approval rating directly to the situation with Japan. The election that took place, and I'm saying this analytically because I don't want to get involved in Korean politics, but if you look at what public opinion said at the time of the assembly elections in April, it had much more to do with the economy, with social conditions and other issues. And it wasn't directly related to the outreach to Japan. You're right, if you again look at public opinion polls, the people of Korea see a benefit in the security and economic relationship with Japan. They're actually voting with their feet and money by 7 million visits a year to Japan. But I think you're right to the extent that there are still questions about these historical issues, which I don't think are off the table. But it's our view, and I have, and just last week, 7 senators from the U.S. Congress and 7 from the House of Representatives. The admiration for that, that's why I called it a very brave political step, because there are aspects of it that are not popular. But what it does is it changes the environment, the security environment, the important issues of North Korea, rule of law in the region. These are all important issues for the future of Korea, as much as as well as the United States and Japan. So again, I wouldn't over focus on that as the reason, but I also would say that you have to look at the whole benefit, and I think that is seen by the Korean people.
Thank you, Masters. Next question.
Thank you, Vice President Archana. I'm a Master of Public Policy student here at the Ford School. My question is, how did the United States and Korea together as allies view the role of other stakeholders in the Indo-Pacific region like India? Thank you.
Are you directing that to a particular nation?
Of course, India is more and more a vital partner in the region. That's why we now call it the Indo-Pacific rather than just specifically the Pacific. And we have, and Korea is not part of this, but we have the Quad process with Japan, Australia, India, and the United States that's moving forward in trying to coordinate many policy steps, bringing India into the larger region, because we think that's hugely important. I'll let Ambassador Cho talk about Korea.
Well, I spent 3 years in my diplomatic career in New Delhi as a political counselor in 2005 and 2007. And I found already at the time that India would become one of the most potential partners with Korea for future, not only on economic cooperation, but also strategic partner. As Ambassador mentioned, the United States is actually seeking some kind of unilateral cooperation in the Pacific. But in trilateral cooperation, Korea is Japan. AUKUS, is also. So Korea is a member of those trilateral cooperation among Korea and Japan, but also could be an additional partner for World AUKUS too. So within the Indo-Pacific area, so like-minded countries based on democracy, countries like U.S Korea-Japan and India will be great partners.
Next question, please.
Theo. I'm from Seoul-based newspaper reporter, John. I have a question to the ambassador. The
Which
stronger
ambassador?
cooperation.
Goldberg. It's looking at Ambassador Shields. I was looking at you, not me.
The stronger cooperation between Seoul and Washington DC started with South Korea's effort to improve its relationship with Japan. However, some people in South Korea feel that Japan hasn't done enough in response aside from lifting its export restrictions. Even some believe that Japan should take a proactive and forward-looking approach. So, what are your thoughts on this view and Japan's position?
I've talked about the benefits that we believe accrue to all three countries as a result of this relationship in security, in business, in addition to the trade preferences that are back in place for Korean companies and Korea. There's also the military and intelligence relationship that has started again, which is hugely important. There's a missile defense agreement so that we share real-time information between the three countries. As to the historical issues, as I mentioned, it was a shameful period in history. And I'm very much aware, living in Seoul and being the U.S. representative in Korea, that there are very strong opinions about what Japan should do. I'm not going to get into the middle of that. The free expression means that the Korean people and the Korean government can do that. We've tried to play a positive role in this because we, of course, are future looking. We want this to be a relationship that benefits the people of the three countries now and in the future. All I can say about the past is that it was a shameful period in Japanese history, and one that should continue to be recognized as such. It has been recognized in the past through the Uchi Kim Dae-jung statement in 1998 and at earlier times. Let me tell you what Prime Minister Kishida has done. You know how this process started. I mentioned President Yoon's outreach, but Prime Minister Kishida then came and paid a reciprocal visit to Korea, where he visited a cemetery and made a statement how he viewed that shameful period in history. He then invited President Yoon to go to the G7 meeting in Hiroshima. They jointly visited the memorial to Korean victims of the atomic bomb. And so there has been a process where this is working. I would ask this question. Would Korea and the people who are pointing to the historical issues as maybe the be-all and end-all of this, would you be in a better position, would Korea be in a better position to argue for those kinds of steps that people want to see? If there was no relationship, if there was still this cold relationship before President Yoon's outreach, or is it more possible now? I ask that as an open question. And so I don't think, my own personal view is that having continuing, if that kind of colder relationship had continued, that would have produced anything more than more ice and more cold.
Well, if I may, thank you for my clarification. But if I may add this one, I mean, to be honest, I didn't expect that, I mean, so many questions about bilateral relationship between Korea and Japan that would be asked here in Ann Arbor, rather than bilateral relationship between Korea and the United States. But the ambassador would mention about the past, but I'm going to add the future. Since the Camp David trilateral solution, which I believe is kind of historic device for the future of trilateral cooperation, and we were able to institutionalize the trilateral cooperation, including now we have held the trilateral ministers meeting, not only foreign ministers, but also defense ministers, and trade ministers, and finance ministers and other areas. And also we have established, we have launched many areas of trilateral dialogue, in particular on, for instance, critically emerging technologies cooperation, which is absolutely necessary for the future.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Nishi. It's great to meet all of you here. So I think Ambassador Shields mentioned the trilateral relations among Japan, America, and also Korea. So my question is that regarding the tension in the Taiwan Strait, is that possible for the three parties to generate a more practical and a more shareable solution to the current situation?
I think that three countries that are committed to peace and rule of law can help a situation in the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea if there are extra legal activities going on. And I mentioned what China has been doing by intimidating Taiwan, democracy in the region. And also, I would point out that in the Camp David agreements, the South China Sea was mentioned too, and what's going on in the Philippines. So, yes, I think that having a grouping, and as Ambassador Cho mentioned, it's not the only grouping. There's AUKUS, there's the Quad and other regional groups that it's important for our countries to come together to express the need for peaceful and law-based solutions to these problems. I don't see it as a front, but as something where we'll work together to try to convince China in this instance, but everyone that there has to be a rules-based order.
I made just one brief comment on that. For Korea, in terms of our trade and supply of energy, we rely on Taiwan Strait over 50% of trade flow and energy. So the maintaining stability of the Taiwan Strait is also crucial to the interests of.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi, it's a great pleasure and honor to be here. As a professor who teaches political science and South Korea politics here, I feel the interest in South Korea has been increased, but the students' interest in North Korea in general has decreased. And then it seems like North Korea overall is being forgotten, especially in the general interest among young generation. So I think that also might be related to sort of U.S. foreign policy has been sort of not make a direct discussion with North Korean regime or responding to its provocation. So, and then on the other hand, that one on one side, on the other hand, I think in South Korea, increasingly conservative, maybe extreme conservative group has been arguing for nuclear self-defense. And then that probably led to some of the agreement in recent period. And then, so my question would be to Ambassador Goldberg, how important North Korean issue to the United States, and there was some expectation or anticipation of provocation, will that change the U.S. policy about North Korea?
We've offered negotiations without preconditions repeatedly over the last few years. I think after what happened in the last U.S. administration and the last South Korean government in their outreach, at the end, what it produced was a North Korea that is moving at all speed to create this nuclear and missile program that it's undertaking. It's now in league with Moscow, another country that is operating outside the rule of law, and it is a very unholy alliance, as I mentioned. I'm not sure you're putting the onus on us. We've offered negotiations without preconditions, and you have to have another party on the other side of the table. And there seems to be another dynamic underway in Pyongyang and in the Seoul deciders' mind about what to do. So I don't think it's a simple look. I think that sure, they will, at a certain point, Kim Jong-un might want sanctions relief or want something else. But right now, it is a bit stuck. And it's stuck because of this program that he's undertaken. And so what we do in response, what we have done, is to build up our alliance, this very strong alliance, to build up our extended deterrence, to show that we are committed to the safety and security of the Republic of Korea. That's what we can do in the absence of a willingness on the other side to even discuss, let alone it would be very difficult, I know, given the issues involved, to come to agreement. But as I say, we've tried and tried repeating.
This weather today, that's going to given us complete answers about it. But U.S. is, I mean, with the perception and also restriction of sense. But everyone remember what happened during the Trump administration. That was a very rare approach by the United States. It's top-down approach. So they had two very formal summits that had never happened before between President Trump. And it probably was a great opportunity for North Korea to get out. But they again missed it. For North Korea watchers for many decades, we used to say that North Korea has never missed the opportunity to miss the opportunity. Right? But maybe after election in November, whoever is elected, there maybe at some point in the future, there will be another opportunity. So I hope next time this of engagement. So, good. And so,
We have another question on the floor. Let me ask a question, because I want to pick up on something that Ambassador Cho had said, that it'd be interesting to focus a bit more on the U.S. ROK side of things. One of the areas that both ambassadors touched on a bit in their opening remarks was cooperation in the technology sector. And it seems like there's quite a deep level of cooperation bilaterally in the technology sector. And it seems that the semiconductor industry is particularly focused there. If I could ask the ambassadors if they could share any additional insights in terms of U.S. ROK cooperation in the technology sector, and particularly with regard to semiconductors.
Well, since the state visit by President April last year, we have seen extremely important progress made between the two sides, particularly on high advanced technology. We have launched a dialogue of critical and emerging technology dialogue shared by the national security advisors to countries, which is very exceptional because national security advisors are not supposed to do advanced technology in the past, but now those issues are and also at the level of industry ministers, scientific ministers, and we have strengthened this government high-level cooperation and consultation. The progress we made so far. And one of the two areas I would like to recognize is AI and space. The AI summit we hosted in Korea was held in May. And the space cooperation since the inauguration of Korea's so-called Korean version of NASA, we call it KASA, and now cooperation in the field of space is going so fast. But in those fields, for the United States, it's led by Vice President Kamala Harris. She attended the AI Summit, and also she joined President in his visit to Goddard Space Center. That was examples. Of course, on semiconductor, Korea is known as one of the major semiconductors. And as I said, Korean major semiconductor manufacturers like Samsung Electronics and SK they made huge investments, and where in particular in Texas, and also state like Michigan, the investment is growing. And so we have seen some government level consultations so close, and also we have witnessed the growing cooperation by the business community. So this is in a sense a kind of stretched cooperation. In the other sense, it's some economic cooperation we have to pursue in the future to secure the common economic and trade interests of two countries.
Let me just, on a government-to-government level and a related issue of what we can do in the areas of emerging technologies, which is to help secure our supply chains in the semiconductor industry. We have created what we call the Fab Four, which is Taiwan, Japan, U.S., and Korea, to discuss issues related to semiconductors and how to deal with education and the training and equipping for a new generation of engineers. So that's another area. The Mineral Security Partnership, where we're discussing how to source the minerals and resources needed for batteries for electric vehicles, for graphite, which is used both in batteries, but also in the creation of chips. These are hugely important issues that we can deal with together. And again, we can do that trilaterally as well as bilaterally. And so we are hugely engaged in trying to work with our partners to make sure that we are secure and that we can continue producing these very advanced technologies for the 21st century. In the case of batteries and EVs and solar and Q cells to help create a green economy here in the United States. With the assistance of many Korean companies and the legislation, the industrial policy that the U.S. has created. And Korea has taken a leading role in that. I believe they're taking over the chairmanship of the Mineral Securities Partnership.
I'd like to invite any questions that may have arisen on this topic.
So like a lot of people said here, first of all, it is a great honor to be present. My question now would be, you talked a lot about what has been done between the US and Korea. And I was wondering, in your opinion, what would be the next step of this US Korea relation?
Okay, next step. When in the United States, it's election season. So I went to post-Chicago for conventions, Republican Party. And I had a chance to meet a number of politicians both sides. And I found that there's absolute consensus on both sides that Korea-US alliance should be stressed. And also, together with the trilateral cooperation, there's no doubt. So next step, well, we would be probably seeking further, based on what we have achieved so far. In particular, the outcome of state visit and captain summit. So we'll probably explore expanding our cooperation beyond what we have achieved so far. So I think advanced technology like AI and space will be our next area of cooperation for us. And for the security area, we have upgraded our alliance. We call it a nuclear-based alliance, which means our extended deterrence committed by the United States. So further on that, based on the guideline we have adopted, we'll probably next some interoperability of such cooperation mechanisms, nuclear-based.
I mentioned we just saw the wonderful Naval Architecture Department here and what they're doing in design of ships and engineering. And that's an example of an area that we are fully engaged in trying to carry out. Where the shipbuilding industry in Korea is so dynamic, so important, HD, Hyundai, and Hanwha Ocean, two premier companies that have now signed contracts with the U.S. Navy to do overhaul of ships and take some of the pressure off of our domestic industry. As we get closer as countries, that's what we can do together. Now, there's still competition among our businesses in AI and some other areas as they're developed. But some of the academic work and some of the raw science can be shared. And that's, as Ambassador Cho said, Embassy Seoul, we're fully, our work agenda is really now carrying out what we've agreed, this huge agenda that our two presidents laid out last year. And it's going pretty well. And one of our goals is to make sure that that is now something that is permanent and will be ongoing, and will be able to survive political changes in any of the three countries in the trilateral or U.S. bilateral.
Thank you. Yes, that's.
Thank you again. I'm going to ask one on behalf of students. What would you say in your long careers, you've all served, well, all of us, but you've served in many different countries, different continents. What would you say are one or two things that you would encourage students looking to get into diplomacy or international affairs, whether it's for their government or to working overseas somewhere? What are some of the skills that they really need to develop or that they should think about focusing on? And I just would say, I noticed that both of you have Spanish as a leading background, which is very interesting, given the places that you have served. So maybe that's one of the keys.
That's the Goldberg senior.
You hit on something, Ambassador, which is languages. Learning a lot about history and current situation in the world as you're studying here. I think to be a diplomat also requires great curiosity about the world. It requires some sacrifice, moving every 3-4 years, uprooting your family, and you know, now when in ancient times there weren't sometimes 2 working members of a household. Now it's standard, and so that's hard on families. And I'm talking about both men and women in the Foreign Service. And we have many tandem couples too, who are both in the Foreign Service and serve together. There's something really unique in what we do that is only possible in government. You can have a wonderful career around the world and do tremendous work, and we meet people in the non-governmental sector, in the assistance area. But you know, when I think back about my career and the opportunities that I've had to witness history, I was when Dan, his resume, saw the people power in the Philippines. I was in South Africa at the time of the transition, the last days of the all-white government and the first democratic election, and saw Nelson Mandela inaugurated president just before I left South Africa. These are the kinds of things I was in Colombia during the drug wars. Not that that was so much fun, but we helped Colombia overcome many of the problems when I went back as planning for Plan Colombia, helping the government institute a presence in the whole country. Involved with the Bosnia peace negotiations with Ambassador Holbrooke and the Kosovo situation, and then going back as the chief of mission there. These are historic kinds of events, and are things that you can only do if you're working really in government. You can be around them in other areas. You can have a wonderful career also in business and probably make a little more money than Ambassador Cho and I have made. But you know, this has really been it's so fulfilling. So for preparing for it, when I started doing this, and I think Dan probably when we took the test, it was more like a Jeopardy game, and you know, what do you know about this, and what do you know about that, and if you pass the test and then went through the oral exams, you got in. It's a bit different now. You do have to have some demonstrated activities and languages, and those will be rewarded as you go through the process. But as you can see, despite all the sacrifices, you know, once in a while you have to go to a war zone these days. Thankfully, not as much as over the last, as was the case until the end of the last decade. So there are a lot of sacrifices in being separated from your family in those situations. And I've served at posts where you are unaccompanied. So those are things to think about when you do this, but it requires sacrifice. And lastly, I'll be a little corny here. You know, for me, when you have a certain set of values, not necessarily having to do with the administration of the day, which you as ambassador, I represent, there is a great feeling about representing your country. And those students who are from India or other places, there's a great satisfaction in that. And I'm sure Ambassador Cho would agree with that from the Korean perspective. So there are wonderful opportunities. I encourage anybody who is interested in life in the Foreign Service to inquire. Ambassador Shields, Ambassador Page can help out in that regard. And now I'll get Ambassador Cho to say something about how to join the Korean Foreign Service.
I absolutely feel on your version of how that I mean to become different. But some other stories. You know, these days we are seeing, I'm impressed with the development of AI. And sometimes we see the list of jobs which will disappear alongside advancement of AI. But I truly believe diplomat is an exception. I don't think AI can represent country.
AI isn't smart enough to do it.
And AI can represent interests. So please do not lose your hope. And also keep your passion. Become a diplomat to represent your country, your country's national interest in international. I think this is one of the most rewarding jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, ambassadors. Is there any final question? We're running out of time, but is there any final question? Yes, please.
It's related to the question. It's related to the question that Susan asked. So as career diplomats, I would imagine that there are times when your personal political convictions are at odds with, let's say, a particular administration's policy. And I'm just wondering about those occasions. It would be a foremost thing in my mind in terms of reconciliation, wearing two different hats at different times, possibly. But curious about how you negotiate such whirlpools.
I think you have to put everything you do in the context of it being either a policy or, in a very rare instance, moral or ethical decision if you disagreed so violently with a particular policy. I've had friends and colleagues who left the Foreign Service. When I worked on the Bosnia crisis in the mid-90s, there were a few people who left the State Department who believed that what was going on in Bosnia was genocide and didn't want to represent the U.S. It happens from time to time. But my own personal view is only if you believe that it is a moral dilemma. Administrations, governments come and go, but the values and the worth of a country should be endured. But if there is a problem in doing it, you have to do the honorable thing. And there have been people very recently who've done that. A few people, I think, and it's rare. I think there were only 2 people that I know of or can think of. One was a civil servant and actually I don't know, maybe a foreign service officer over Gaza. And felt that they couldn't continue. So they have to do the honorable thing, which is, and it's quite honorable. Most of what I've disagreed with over time have been about, I wouldn't do something if I were king, and I'm not. In terms of policy, you're always going to have those disagreements. But it's only when it's very fundamental that you have a problem.
I have nothing to add.
All right, thank you. We've really reached the end of our time. So if you could please join me in giving applause to our ambassadors for such a